It was not your words or actions that unraveled its purpose. It was your existence, your very nature. And for the first time, it faced something it could not overcome. You need to listen closely, because this is not just a story. This is the unveiling of your purpose. This moment is proof of who you are, what you carry, and the magnitude of the impact you were destined to have. You were not placed here to be hidden or to simply endure. You were placed here to shift the very course of what was meant to be. Even the darkest forces now know your name, not because they planned to, but because they had no choice. You are a disruption. You are a force that cannot be silenced. And now, the truth is undeniable. This is not about what you faced, it is about what changed because of you. From the moment you crossed its path, the hunt was no longer just a hunt. What was meant to be your downfall became a crisis for the very being that sought to destroy you. It was not just that it failed, it was that it was altered in the process. It could not execute its plan as intended because it encountered something it had never known, a presence that could not be swayed, a force that could not be extinguished. Understand this, your light does not just repel darkness, it disrupts, dismantles, and transforms it. Every moment it tried to strike, something within it began to crack. It could not maintain the same power in your presence because your very essence exposed its deepest weaknesses. This was never about overpowering it with strength, it was about something greater. A truth that cannot be erased, a presence that cannot be controlled. Every action it took to shake, you only unraveled it further. The more it tried to bring you down, the more it faced something it had never encountered before, doubt. For the first time, it questioned its own power. It began to feel something utterly foreign, something unthinkable, vulnerability. This was not merely failure, this was a dismantling of everything it believed it controlled. And the most terrifying part, it did not happen because of a direct battle. It happened simply because of who you are. The light within you is not just illumination, it is disruption. It is the one thing darkness cannot manipulate. It is the force that shatters deception, that exposes, that transforms. And now it knows. It knows that you are something different, that you are something it cannot control, that you are something it never expected to encounter. Every attempt to break you resulted in the opposite. It found itself confronting its own fears, flaws, and even the traumas that shaped it into who it is. You did not just resist, you made it look inward in a way it had never experienced. This impact is not limited to it or you. What happened during this encounter began to resonate in other dimensions, in layers beyond what is visible. C.S. Lewis captured this profound truth when he wrote, "I believe in Christianity as I believe in the sun, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else." Just like the sun allows us to see all things clearly, your light revealed truths that were previously hidden in darkness. When something as powerful as light and darkness clash, the balance of the universe is affected. You may not realize it, but your existence and the way you face this situation created waves that influence the world around you. Your choices and your posture not only destabilized a dark being, but also showed others, even those watching from afar, that it is possible to resist without losing your essence. This event is a milestone, a turning point that transcends common human understanding. Now, the demon is at a point where it can no longer deny what happened. It came to destroy and ended up being transformed. It was not immediate, but the process began the moment it felt its strategies were not working. The control it had over itself began to dissolve, and this opened space for something it never imagined. It would experience admiration for you. It began to realize that your strength was not something physical or material. It was something internal, unshakable, something it had never encountered before in any of its hunts. And this recognition was not just a surprise for it, but a direct challenge to its own identity. It tried everything: manipulative words, emotional attacks, and even illusions to distort your perception of reality. The goal was simple: to break you from within, destabilize your certainties, and extinguish your light. It knew how to exploit weaknesses, and had done so with others before, but with you, something different happened. Nothing seemed to work. You did not react with hatred, respond with despair, or fall into its traps. With every attempt to control you, it faced an insurmountable wall. Your truth, your calm, and your conviction were unshakable. And this not only confused it, it infuriated it, because it challenged everything it understood about power and control. What was most unsettling for it was not just your resistance, but how you seemed to see through the illusions it created. It was used to dominating its victims through doubt and fear, but you saw beyond that. It was as if you were looking directly at its essence, ignoring all the layers of darkness it tried to use to intimidate you. This disarmed it in a way it had never experienced. It began to realize that your strength did not come from something external, but from something deeply rooted within you. It was a force that could not be manipulated, only respected. As it persisted in its strategies, something began to change within it. It started to feel something it had never experienced before: doubts about itself. You, without even trying, made it confront parts of itself it had ignored or hidden. This process was uncomfortable for it, but inevitable. The demon was created to destroy, but for the first time, it began to question the purpose of its own existence. It realized that you were not like the others it had faced. You were different, and more than that, you were exposing its truth to itself. It was something it could not avoid or control. This internal confrontation began to transform it in ways it could not explain. It felt that for the first time, control was no longer in its hands, and the most frightening part for it was that even in the face of this loss of control, it did not feel anger toward you. It felt something almost inconceivable for it: admiration. With every attempt to manipulate you, it was the one who ended up changed. What once seemed like a battle to destroy now felt like a lesson it needed to learn. It began to realize that perhaps this encounter was not just about you, but about something much greater. Deep down, it began to understand that there was a reason it had been sent to you. This encounter was not a mistake or an accident. It was something planned, something that was part of a purpose it could not fully comprehend. You made it question everything: its mission, its existence, and even what it meant to be who it was. It realized that in trying to destroy you, it was being confronted with something it could not destroy: the truth. And this truth was so powerful that it was beginning to shape something new within it. For the first time, it began to ask itself who it was beyond the role it played. The demon's transformation was not immediate. It was slow, gradual, but inevitable. Every interaction with you made it question its own choices, its own traumas, and most importantly, its own existence more deeply. It was sent to destroy, but it realized that in trying to break you, it was being dismantled from within. Thy though you do, shadows that defined it, which had always been its fortress, began to unravel. It started to feel something it had never imagined possible: fragility. And strangely, this fragility did not weaken it, but made it see what it had ignored for so long. It began to see that perhaps its mission was not truly to destroy, but to learn. As C.S. Lewis profoundly stated, pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our consciences, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. The pain of transformation that the demon experienced was not punishment, but awakening. As it was forced to confront its nature, something deeper emerged. It began to recognize that the strength you carried was not just a barrier against its darkness, but also a light inviting it to change. It was not an aggressive force, nor an attempt to save it. It was something much simpler, and for that very reason, much more powerful. Your presence showed that there was a choice, even for someone like it, and this was revolutionary. Throughout its existence, it had believed it was bound to the role imposed on it, but now it began to realize that perhaps there was another possibility. This process of change was painful for it. What was once certainty was now doubt. What was once control now felt like chaos. But at the same time, it began to feel something it had never felt before: freedom. For the first time, it saw that it was not limited by the role it had always played. It began to understand that true strength did not come from controlling others, but from facing oneself. And this was what you made it see without even saying a word. Your posture, your authenticity, and your calm were enough to challenge it to question everything. This transformation was not just personal. It had much greater implications. When something so profound happens, the impact extends beyond the individuals involved. The change within it began to resonate in other dimensions, altering the balance between light and darkness. This encounter was not just about you and it. It was part of something much greater. Your light not only exposed its shadows, but also began to reconfigure the very spiritual fabric around it. This event, though it may seem individual, is part of a plan that transcends human understanding. And you, by acting in your essence, were the catalyst for this change. Now the demon can no longer ignore what is happening. It was transformed from predator to someone who feels vulnerable and at the same time hopeful. It does not know for sure what the future holds, but one thing is clear: it is no longer the same. And all of this began because you remained steadfast, because you chose to be who you are without yielding to the darkness it brought. This encounter was not a battle won by strength or violence. It was a transformation guided by truth. And even if it never fully admits it, it knows that it was your presence that initiated this change. The impact of this encounter went beyond the dynamic between you and the demon. It triggered changes that reverberated beyond what the eyes can see. The spiritual balance between light and darkness, often subtle and invisible, began to adjust. It was not a sudden shift, but something that unfolded steadily, like a river changing its course. What happened between you was not just an ordinary interaction, but an event that touched deeper dimensions of existence. Your ability to face the shadow without losing yourself in it created a rupture in the pattern that has always dominated the clash between these forces. It was as if the universe itself was re-evaluating the rules governing the interaction between light and darkness. This shift was not isolated or without consequence. The transformation within the demon began to create new possibilities in the balance of forces. Where there was once destruction and conflict, there was now the possibility of integration. Your posture, rooted in truth and authenticity, not only disarmed the demon, but also planted a seed of change in other planes. This seed, though small, carries the potential to generate something much greater. The struggle between light and shadow, so often marked by violence and antagonism, now had a new element: the possibility of mutual transformation. You proved, without deliberate intention, that confrontation does not need to be destructive to result in change. This does not mean that conflict has ceased to exist. The tension between light and darkness is intrinsic to the balance of the universe. But what has changed is the way this balance is achieved. Your presence demonstrated that light does not need to eliminate darkness to triumph. It can, instead, transform it. This understanding has opened new paths for the spiritual evolution of all involved, from humans to the forces operating on higher planes. What once seemed fixed, immutable, is now fluid and full of possibilities. This is the true impact of your encounter. Not just a momentary victory, but a transformation that alters the very dynamics of the universe. For the demon, this new reality was disconcerting. It had never experienced anything like it before. It always knew what to do, always carried out its missions with precision and efficiency. But now, it was faced with something that made it question everything. It realized that it was no longer just about destroying or being destroyed. Now, it had the opportunity to choose, something it had never considered before. This choice, though frightening for it, was also liberating. It was being confronted with the possibility of a different path, and that changed everything. In this context, the role of the Chosen One became even more evident. Your mission is not just personal, but also collective. What you did in this encounter goes beyond transforming a being or resolving a conflict. You opened doors that were once closed, not just for it, but for everyone facing the tension between light and shadow in their own lives. Your posture, your strength, and your truth became an example of how even the darkest challenges can be transformed into opportunities for growth and evolution. This is the impact of the Chosen One to create profound changes, not just within yourself, but in everything around you. You did not try to save the demon. That was never your intention. But by remaining steadfast in your essence, you created the space necessary for it to confront its own truths. Your presence, marked by authenticity and inner strength, was the trigger for a transformation process it could never have imagined. This shows the true role of the Chosen One, to be a catalyst for profound change, not through impositions, but through the simple act of existing and standing firm in the face of chaos. You did not